This is Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell, all talk and all crime.
Dennis Kozlowski was a 27-year veteran of Tyco, the last 10 years serving as CEO, building one of the most successful growth machines in the history of corporate America, thousands of acquisitions until the downfall and a prison sentence of unprecedented length, serving more time than murderers. This interview is based in part on a book by Northern Kentucky University's College of Business Ethics professor Catherine Neal. The book, Taking Down the Lion, The Triumphant Rise and Tragic Fall of Tyco's Dennis Kozlowski. We're honored to have you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Jim.
It's good to put this whole experience in perspective because the whole corporate lynching era from then, we're beyond that. An incredible record. You started at $20 million in revenues, built it to $40 billion, 40 quarters of increased profits, and that's 10 years, and you served 10 years. So that's pretty consistent record, and yet the legacy obscured by the shower curtain and other things. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel good about my 27 years at Tyco and the record we put together for our shareholders and the amount of growth we had there during that time. And I feel that I put the era of my prosecution and what I went through in back of me now. That was some time ago. And I'm off to a new start, doing other things and moving on from where I was. So I'm into the next chapter of my life and well into it.
Okay, we're going to get to that. Let's talk about those two things quickly that obscured the legacy and the myth around them. The $6,000 shower curtain, explain it a little bit. You never even saw it.
No, I never saw that. That was a decorator who installed a shower curtain, from what I understood, and I only got to understand that at the time that I was indicted by the Manhattan DA. So never saw it. No, wouldn't know it if it fell on me.
Now, that place was $18 million plus $10 million of renovations, for which you were planning to use for a couple of days a month, right? Why? Why would you need that?
Well, Jim, we're going back to something a very long time ago. And as I said, I really moved on from that era of my life. But we were doing a lot of deals in New York at the time, and we couldn't be seen in public. The internet was starting. If other CEOs or people who had investment opportunities were coming in to visit me, you'd be reading about it on the internet. That was affecting stock prices, and that was affecting our ability to do deals. So we wanted a place where we could hide away, that it was Manhattan real estate, it was going to appreciate, that ultimately really wouldn't cost us anything through appreciation. And we did a number of deals in that apartment. So it was really...
It's more than paid for the apartment.
Yeah, it was really a corporate headquarter of sorts where we did it. And I think at the end of the day, after I left Tyco, the apartment was sold for more money than was into it.
And I will say that the first problem arose because of the paintings that were installed. Sales tax wasn't paid, and you were kind of held accountable for that. But normally the seller is, not the buyer. So it seemed to be almost, unfair attack.
Sure. Well, and those charges were later dismissed against me.
Exactly. So. On the birthday party, the only question there is it's sort of blurring of personal and corporate. You actually paid for all the personal.
That's correct.
But again, in retrospect, you didn't know that it was going to be that sort of off the wall, right? The theme and all that.
Well, yeah, the theme. Well, the DA managed to put a couple of segments from a get together and play it up. There were children at the party. There were directors of mine at the party. It was no big deal. It was a couple-hour event in the middle of other things going on, and all expenses associated with that were personally paid for by me.
Okay, you were accused of basically stealing $170 million from Tyco through undocumented secret loans, etc. The sentence ended up, you were in prison, I think, for over 100 months. The average homicide is 52 months. They tried to charge you under RICO, which is, criminal enterprise mafia, and I guess all 80 of those charges were shut out. You were tried by the state, not the federal. All this was documented, though, by Price Waterhouse and your board.
The bonuses were all on the books and records of the company, yes. Yes, and the bonuses were all audited by outside auditors, so all that was there. I was accused and convicted of not having the bonuses appropriately approved by directors. Which
is why they call it stealing your own bonuses.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Your assets were frozen for 11 years?
They were, yes. That's one of the things I think most people don't know, that the DA has enormous amounts of power. They can freeze your assets and make it extremely difficult for you to function when you are indicted. So your ability to hire legal counsel, to pay your bills, to function as as a normal person is rapidly taken away well before you're convicted. So you're not convicted of anything at that time, and yet your assets are suddenly frozen. Checks you wrote to the electric company and to the fuel company, to wherever, begin to bounce as soon as they freeze your assets. And this is done well before anybody's convicted, before you show up in court, before you do anything. So there's an awful lot of prosecutorial power that really handicaps somebody in their ability to defend themselves.
When you're supposed to be presumed innocent at that time. Looking back, do you feel that you were railroaded? Do you feel remorseful?
Jim, I think this whole incident is best told by a third party. And that third party in this case is Professor Catherine Neal from Northern Kentucky University, who I did not know before all this happened. Who was teaching ethics courses at her university. She was trying to figure out what went on at Tyco. She took a sabbatical to research it. She interviewed the DA, she interviewed jurors, she interviewed employees of the company, and she came to her own conclusions. And her conclusions were, which I agree with, her conclusions were nothing criminal, went on. Sure, there was some bad judgment, but this was the 90s too.
Yeah.
That we were talking about. Growth. Our growth was spectacular, and there was some bad judgment, but Professor Neal, I think, really came to the right conclusions, and it's well documented in her book.
Very well documented. And I asked her point blank. She said that you told her to pursue the truth 100% wherever it led.
Yes, I had no influence whatsoever
wherever
she was going.
All right, let's talk about some of the factors now in our remaining couple of minutes. Timing. You were locked in with Enron and all that, but those companies all went belly up.
That's correct.
Tyco was a profitable, hugely successful entity at the same time. So bad luck, or
Tyco thrived to this day. I have not been able to track what others have done with Tyco well after I left it, but it was wildly successful and continues to be wildly successful today. It's broken up into a number of other companies, but it's done extremely well.
Now, what about sometimes, success and downfall can be the same traits, right? You were very successful motivating your folks by a decentralized philosophy, by profit incentives, et cetera. But you weren't in touch with a lot of the stuff, a lot of the things we just talked about, right? You didn't really know were going on, the curtain and all that stuff. So was it kind of, some of your downfall brought about by the qualities made you successful?
Sure. We had a very small corporate staff. We believed in finding the best people we can around the world to run our businesses and keeping our corporate staff very small and non-bureaucratic. So we had 260,000 people worldwide running businesses in over 60 different countries. There's no way one person's going to have a handle with that kind of growth. You really have to delegate and really have to decentralize and find entrepreneurial types, to run the businesses. So a lot of the details were not known by people back at headquarters.
I want to talk a little bit about where you came from, because you came from a long way from metaphorically from Wall Street. South 10th Street in Newark.
Yes,
a little bit, and you slept on a cot in your
I
house.
did, yes. We were pretty poor growing up, but we didn't know that. I had two sisters, and we lived in a 4-room apartment, a cold water flat, where there's one coal stove in the kitchen.
Wow.
No shower in the place, a bathtub, and my sisters and I shared a room. My sisters had the bed, and I had the cot. So that was life for about 10 or 12 years for us.
Where'd that drive come from then?
It's hard to tell, Jim. I really don't know. But as I got to college and got to other people's homes in the suburbs or in the city, I saw there's a big world out there that I didn't know about, and I was driven to do better, to to achieve, and I think that was some of it.
Do you ever think at the end you lost track of some of those values in terms of, $6,000 shower curtain, which you didn't buy, I agree.
Sure.
But that, the level of what appeared to be kind of greed versus where you came from, that a little bit too much?
The shower curtain or whatever those material things existed, it really, I was blind to that. I was so focused on growing Tyco. I was traveling 80% of the time. Life for me was an airplane and a hotel. You
didn't let go of your values, in other words. And suddenly becomes kind of a greedy,
Right. I was living living for the company, and so everything was dedicated, to
let's talk
to
about the company. Now, what was your sort of vision for Tyco? And I'm a huge Buffett fan and a Jack Welch fan, and you kind of built sort of a conglomerate. Tell us your growth strategy, and how did you do it so fast? How did you integrate so many acquisitions?
I had an excellent team of people, and I was able to build a team both at the small corporate staff we had and of the people running our operations, running our divisions. And in doing that, people were able to grow their own divisions using a model that we initially put together. And that model was accretive acquisitions within the segment of businesses that we were in at that time. And, and that growth came from people that were part of the team. No one person could do it. You really need a group of people to make that happen.
Now, you seem to have done a brilliant job on taking a company that was sort of industrial with cyclicality and smoothing that out, right? I mean, you had a real strategy
Yes.
to build more consistent earning streams.
Yes, and healthcare was a big part of that strategy. We had a vision that healthcare would be meaningful to the company, and that's what we did.
You had a 10-year term, which obviously probably would have been longer if it could have been, and Welch had a 20-year term. Most corporations, very small terms. Do you think it's important to get that long of a runway?
I think 10 years is probably, someplace between 8 and 12 years is probably about the right time, for a CEO. Anything longer than that, I think when you're denying opportunities to other people, to move along in the organization, and two, after 8 or 10 or 12 years, you really start believing your own press. And I think, if there were term limits in the corporations, around 10 years is probably about the right time.
How many folks did you have in corporate, by the way?
We had about 60 people in corporate.
Wow. See, Buffett has 23. So it's that's pretty amazing. GE's the opposite in my mind. They've got, reams of guys running around doing Six Sigma internal audits.
Yes.
That's where you came up. Was GE a template for you?
GE's template of being number one and number two in your businesses was certainly a template, because if you're number one or number two, you make less mistakes, in the business, and so from that standpoint, we really
the other side,
like the GE
the other side of whether you try to be like GE was they built GE Capital during Welch's time as a huge machine, which
Yes.
they're now divesting. Another thing that I thought I was impressed by was you stayed within your circle of competence. You didn't just buy hodgepodge things. So was the acquisition of CET to try to build a GE Capital? And
It was.
Was that a mistake, obviously?
That was a mistake, obviously. That was, you could do 1,000 good acquisitions and you remember it for the 1,000 good ones. Then you go off and do one bad one, and that's it. So you erase the success of 1,000 great good acquisitions. And
why didn't it work? Just because the market changed and the credit agents?
It changed pretty much because of Enron. When the rating agencies had Enron rated as a AAA, or whatever the rating was, it was a top-notch rating. The rating agencies did what they said they wouldn't do. They downgraded the CIT rating because it was owned by Tyco, and the thought was Tyco could somehow, some way raid the CIT cash. And in the process of doing that, they downgraded CIT, and CIT bought its money on overnight commercial paper, so their rates went up. Once their rates went up, the spread between what they're paying for money and what they're loaning money
their business model went down.
It's like squeezing a margin right out of the
model
business.
Went down.
Yeah.
Was it a mistake to get out of your knitting then?
It was. In retrospect, that was a mistake.
Okay, now you had this bonus system there that was, to me, well documented. I know Catherine said that it was hard for the jury to understand, which I agree. but it's actually pretty clearly laid out, and the board had to lay it out. Why didn't the board support you? Why did they almost pretend they didn't know that some of this bonus stuff was going on?
I think the board was concerned about their own selves. I was indicted, our CFO was indicted, our chief legal counsel was indicted, a director was indicted, and I think with everybody with the amount of people being indicted, every director was protecting themselves, and I think anybody that came forward to try and support me would have risked some problems.
So the truth was lost, in other words, by people covering their asses.
And other directors literally fled the country.
So. All right, don't be modest here now. The growth machine was unbelievable. What was the skills, the set of skills that made you more successful than anybody else really in doing this?
I think it was the discipline of the acquisitions. You had to find a company that you really believe you could grow. Nobody ever sold us a company because they were doing well. They sold us a company because they did really well at one time and something went wrong. And if we could fix that which went wrong and go back to the company it once was, we were interested in the acquisition.
Were you good at seeing that? Was it financial, sort of, you could just see through a balance sheet or something? Or culture of the management? What?
We were good at turning back time at a company. If for example, you had a superior medical product, and with that medical product, you were able to capture big market shares, but then you started building on that, things that you didn't know much about, or you went higher up the food chain for healthcare. If we could go in and strip out where you went up higher up the food chain and return back to your knitting, to basically what you were doing, we saw that as a tremendous opportunity.
Okay, in a few seconds now, on the non-modest side, you were there in 10 years of huge binge growth in the U.S. as well.
Oh, the wind was at Iraq.
So
Absolutely.
The wind was at your back, and then, of course, when you left it went the other way. But you think you still added a lot more value than just the wind, right?
Oh, sure. We outperformed all the markets, all the indexes, all the time. We had growth at 50, 60% a year. So that beat any measurement by far in the markets.
One of the big issues was all these secret loans and the bonuses not approved and whatever. Did you not build Tyco's infrastructure up from a mom and pop? Did you outgrow that capability? And did you blur lines too much that you almost did use it as kind of a piggy bank?
I think we were paid in stock, and part of 90% of our compensation was in stock. And once you're awarded stock, you have an immediate tax liability that needs to be paid to the government. So I inherited a system where you were able to take loans from the company. In fact, the system inherited by my team when I became CEO was the loans at the time were at 2%, and we changed that to market rates for interest rates for the company. And mind you, too, I was not convicted on anything to do with loans. That was not part of anything prosecutorial, and there were no loan convictions there. However, having said that, we did take loans so that we wouldn't have to sell stock, and in the process of doing that, monies were used basically for taxes, but monies came from different pockets for different things. So I was permitted to take a loan at the rate of my tax liability, and those loans, were reported. Those loans were in the proxies or where they needed to be, at the time.
And as you know, one of the things that sort of the prosecutors in a conspiracy sense, because it wasn't true, was that you had these loans outstanding, and then you got a bonus from a big deal, and part of that bonus paid off the loans.
That's
so
correct.
They're saying, oh, you gave yourself a bonus to pay your loans off.
They're saying I gave myself a bonus to forgive my loans, but I earned the bonus by the formula, and as opposed to paying me, the bonus went to pay down the loans.
You're listening to Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell. We'll be back with former Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski. You're listening to Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell.
We're back with Dennis Kozlowski, the deposed lion of Tyco. You went to what you call a gated community in a mid-state correctional facility, and you became the laundry czar.
I did.
Tell us about prison.
The laundry job I quickly recognized was probably the best job in prison. It kept me out of my cell.
So you're always a good business guy.
About 8 hours a day. It paid 85 cents a day. So it was probably one of the higher paying jobs there. But I was able to do laundry, pick up, deliver laundry, and read books within the laundry room while the washing machines and dryers were doing their work. So I raised my hand for that job and ultimately wound up doing it.
How did you survive over 100 months when you saw kidnappers, rapists, murders going in and out?
Reading. I did it through two things. I read every biography, fiction, nonfiction book I could get my hands on or sent in to me. And I had wonderful support from family, from friends, and
Dennis's wife Kimberly is sitting right here.
From Kimberly, yes.
And by the way, she's very supportive. You can't see; she's nodding on all throughout this. Now, I mean, we're laughing a little bit about that, but what were the worst moments?
I think the worst moments are the holidays. Having Thanksgivings and Christmas, and that time in jail. The worst moments were when my daughters got married, my grandchildren were born. Not being there for those events, so things that center around family times. Or my daughter suffered a significant injury while traveling in Bali, a life-threatening injury, and I wasn't able to reach out or contact her. I was communicating through Kimberly, to my daughter. So there's some pretty horrific moments, while there.
You gave a building to Seton Hall where you went, and they took your name off of it. How does that hurt?
Well, no, I asked them to take my name off of Jim. Yeah.
But you didn't ask for your money back, probably.
No, I didn't. But I think, why stir up controversy, or why put the administration in a position that they have something that they would have a tough time defending?
How did your health hold up through all this?
My health was generally pretty good. I did have one incident where I had a heart issue, but I came out of it fine. But it's no place to be if you're sick or or have a health issue.
Probably not a very healthy meal.
No, the food was horrible.
Now, on the finance side, you paid. We talked. Your assets were frozen for 11 years. You paid $167 million in fines. How did you survive financially?
I had to sell off my assets and pay the fines and pay the restitution. So I sold my homes. I sold what I had and satisfied all the debts.
And you're making money now?
I'm back working now. Yes, I'm doing merger and acquisition work, some business consulting work. I have some wonderful clients, and I'm back in the swing of things.
You're not going to go buy a bunch of companies?
No, not personally.
No Tyco Jr.?
Yeah, no.
Do you have let's talk a little bit about reform items, PRISM and then governance. Do you sat in there? Do you have ideas for prison reform, or there's a lot of waste going on, right, of talent, and folks go back out on the street with nothing?
Prison reform should be high on everybody's agenda because it's such a drain on society. Yeah. I'm involved in the Fortune organization, which helps people coming out of jail to get back on their feet, providing housing, job training, and ultimately jobs. And that's really what needs to be done. People need a place to live as they're going through a transition until they can become taxpayers themselves. And we do a lot of that at Fortune. We helped, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 people last year alone.
Now, you were obviously successful as a laundry czar and all you did. You were turned down for parole, though, the first time.
I was, yes. I was turned down for work release.
What was that based on?
I certainly met all the requirements.
Yeah. On corporate governance, do you have ideas there? And you actually were innovative in appointing a lead director long before that was popular. Do you think the chairman and CEO roles should be split? How would you define independence?
Sure. I do not think the chairman and CEO roles should be split. I believe that anytime I've seen that role split, I've seen dysfunction at the top.
Hewlett-Packard.
Yeah, there's a good example.
It's the best example.
Yeah, a good example. But I do like the idea of lead director, where directors can put things on an agenda through somebody other than the CEO.
You were blamed for conflicts of interest, et cetera, but a lot of the board members were getting money from the company for different reasons, so that seems to be kind of spurious. Do you think there needs to be any board reform where none of that can go on? There's a trade-off, isn't there, between pure independence and actually understanding the business, which you have to understand,
yes.
Would you say? So
yes.
Where do you come down on how to balance that?
You really need to find strong, competent directors. The demand is greater than the supply in that area. So once you start compromising on directors, moving down in abilities or skills or experience, it becomes difficult.
It's clearly you did nothing of a criminal nature, as we've been talking about, and the company was highly successful. The stock price was successful until you hit to the 2001 crisis, 9/11, and internet. Financial crisis of 08. Criminal behavior everywhere, if you ask me, selling fraudulent, CD junk, right, which they knew was going in there. No one has gone to jail for 08.
That says it all, right? I mean, it was a different time in 2001, 2002, after Enron and WorldCom, and then you get to 2008, and it's even worse than that because failed companies were borrowing money from the government to pay big bonuses to people who made the decisions that failed the companies. That's what really blows my mind.
A lot of Americans lost 40% of their 401ks. So.
That's correct. Yes.
Now, you were a workaholic. Where you are now, what are the lessons you feel you learned, and who are you now?
The growth that we pushed at the time was unnecessary. We could have grown the company at 30 or 40% of the rate that we were growing it at and had a wildly successful company and a lifestyle. I had no balance back then. My whole life was all about the company. That was a huge mistake and a big lesson learned. I think any enterprise to be successful needs the right amount of balance. You can't have a CEO who's just pushing it, all of the time and expecting everybody around him to be pushing at the same rate. I think that was my biggest takeaway here. I pushed too hard, too fast, too long.
Here's one that just makes no sense to me. You had a board member that brought CIT to you. You agreed to give him a finder's fee, an investment banking fee. What the heck was wrong with that?
It beats me. He was an investment banker.
Yeah.
That's what he did for a living.
And that's a normal course of business. And you're also
correct.
Authorized to decide what to pay the investment bankers.
That's correct.
And here's another one that blows me away. That allegedly you made 700 acquisitions for $8 billion that you never bothered to disclose. How can anybody make 700 acquisitions that nobody knows about?
Yeah, there were small security acquisitions and other acquisitions. And once again, whatever needed to be disclosed was disclosed, and whatever wasn't. But I wasn't the person reading those regulations and disclosing that. But I firmly believe that whatever needed to be disclosed in our organization was. Nobody ever told anybody not to disclose something.
By the way, something that does bother me, but all corporations do it. It has nothing to do with any illegality, which is Frank Walsh was the name of this gentleman. You knew him, and he was chairman of the compensation committee, right? And CEOs always seem to have friends that are chairman of the compensation committee, but you're not, that wasn't something you did differently or whatever. But do you agree that maybe it shouldn't be that way, ideally?
It's hard to distinguish who's a friend and who isn't. I mean, the label of friend, I've never been to Frank's house, we never socialized. So I think friend was something that the media put
That's a corporate governance thing. I don't mean to be mixed.
Yeah.
Let's talk now about the other abuses, Prosecutorial, the media, and even Wall Street. On the first sense, the prosecutors, the feds decided not even to charge you, and the local DA did, which seems very unusual to me. And the third guy, Bellick, who was your chief legal officer, was acquitted.
Yes.
Talk about the abuse for a second of the prosecutors. I know you've talked about the assets.
Well, the prosecutors have unlimited abilities here to do what they please for as long as they want to do it. And we went to trial. Our first trial resulted in a hung jury. The judge declared a mistrial. And then Mark Bellick went to trial, and he was acquitted of all charges. And then we went back to trial again. In my sense, the prosecutors weren't going to give up until they arrived at a conviction, and everybody learned something from the first trial. and I think the prosecutor, was using jurors from the first trial as consultants to them, in the second trial.
On the Wall Street side, the shorts, the folks betting against you, seemed to me to be spreading rumors that, about the manipulating earnings, the spring loading, meaning putting a lot of restructuring charges in acquisitions so it would look good down the road, none of which was true, and not much you could control about it.
No, there's not much you can do about shorts. When the shorts decide to raid your stock, and we had a good multiple, there was meat on the bones. We had a good multiple at a time that other multiples were shrinking. And it was a big opportunity for the shorts.
By the way, you had a $5 billion of free cash flow, while but compared to the Enrons and the other folks you did not have off-balance sheet liabilities, right? That were sort of hidden.
No,
there were rumors. The media spread that maybe you were quitting. The company was inches from bankruptcy. The SEC was investigating you. You had off-balance sheet stuff like Enron, and none of those are true.
None of them are true. And in fact, there's a front page story in one of the major newspapers that we were doing swaps the way Global Crossing and others were doing swaps. And I saw the story one Sunday morning. Said we never did a swap, and that's a way of putting earnings on your income statement without really a transaction happening.
You take the
and then 2 weeks later there's a retraction. Oh, by the way, they really didn't do that. So
this was a perfect storm.
It was. It really was.
How did you keep your sanity?
I just stayed focused, and I just kept.
Did you really believe you were going to get off?
I believe I was going to get acquitted. Yes. In the second trial, yes. Yeah.
Now, at that time, Anderson, as you know, imploded for having signed off on all of Enron stuff, right?
That's correct.
Price Waterhouse was your guys. Should they have had some culpability in any of this? If they're making the case there were no controls, et cetera?
No, I don't think Price Waterhouse deserved any culpability, in this. I think they worked hard. They focused on what they needed to do, and I believe the people in our company were honest, with that.
Well, let me ask it this way: if the prosecutors were correct that what you did was criminal, how could the board and Price Waterhouse not be held accountable? In other words, you didn't do it to begin with. But I'm saying if they believe you did do it and you're going to be convicted on it, your board and the Price Waterhouse is essentially signing off on that behavior.
Yeah, but the point here is we didn't do it.
No, I know that.
I see your theory.
It's a logical inconsistency is what I'm saying.
Of course
they
it is.
can't say you're guilty and these guys had nothing to do with it because they would have the culpability just like you would.
Yes.
As we get down to the end of this, did you have a lot of anger at your board? Did you have the wrong guys on the board, or I guess what people need to understand, which is amazing, is 6 months before this happened, everything was going great, everything, and you were there for 27 years, and the board basically spat you out in just a couple of months.
Oh, it's more than that, Jim. We showed letters in the court of support from the board a month before, 1 month before I was indicted. We saw letters that we need you here for another 5 years. Make sure you re-sign up. So the board was highly supportive, from evidence we showed in court at that time. So I was extremely disappointed. And the bottom line, yes, we should have had a better board. We should have had a stronger, more capable board.
And I might say that the prosecutors were so ruthless, they didn't allow your daughter, who was a lawyer, to sit at your table, right? Because they thought that might get some sympathy.
That's correct. Yeah, my daughter who's passed the bar exam, is educated and a highly skilled lawyer. Was kept from sitting in a well, for fear that the juries would be sympathetic toward me.
Thanks to Dennis Kozlowski for agreeing to stay with us for a few minutes. And now we're really honored. His wife, Kimberly's been in the studio and obviously been a huge reason why Dennis has come out of this so well. And she's agreed to tell us a little bit. Tell us the story of how you met and what spurred you to communicate with him in prison that basically changed his life.
I was a former trader on Wall Street, and I was trading Tyco stock, and that's when I had initially met Dennis. But CEOs don't pay too much attention to traders that they've met. And I was going through a difficult time in my own life. I have some wonderful friends that had a home upstate and offered to have me go up there just for a little retreat. I had been following Dennis's story and what was going on. I knew at that time he was somewhere upstate. Just something made me reach out. And I wrote him a letter and asked him, I don't know if you remember me. Of course, he said he did. And I said, well, I'm going to be upstate. Do you mind if I come up and pay a visit? He said, not at all.
So you didn't really know him, and it was just were you a trader or an analyst?
Trader.
You were a trader. Was it like an act of God or something, just good luck, or did you feel his pain or something, or?
Well, how could you not?
Did you think you obviously that's only had access to all this public stuff, and he's convicted? Did you assume that he was guilty of all this stuff? Or?
No, I knew he wasn't.
You knew he
the
wasn't.
Person that Dennis was. I knew it was just a railroad job. It was just such a public spectacle in the papers, and it just wasn't the person that I knew or knew of, I should say.
I've heard that a great deal of integrity and great with people and everything. So.
Absolutely.
And in the press thought you were basically a monster, right? I mean, so it's so go ahead. So now you actually go visit him in prison. What evolves?
Well, I went up. Prison was something very new, so it was a little intimidating. But I went up there as soon as I got in. Dennis was doing what he does best, makes everybody feel extremely comfortable, very welcoming. And I was only going to stay for 2 hours, and before I knew it, I was there for 6.5 hours.
Is that right? And are you like behind? How does it work? Are you allowed to be in a room with him? Are you behind glass or something? Or
No. It's nothing like it's on television.
Okay, and there's no time limit. Is there no time limit? Obviously, if you could stay 6 hours.
Not a time. They do have visiting hours from 8 till 3 o'clock, and everybody has to leave at that time.
Can you have a private conversation, or are you just in a room?
No. We are in an open room, but we're at a private table.
You're at a
just
table.
the two of us. Yes.
It's like a cafeteria. It's square tables, supermarket tables, and there's guards around, watching every move, and there's a lot of rules. But you sit there and talk as if you were in your company cafeteria.
You were surprised by the chemistry, or I would assume. Or?
Well, yeah, the chemistry built over time.
Did you remember her, by the way?
I did. Yeah. I'm not going to say no, right? Sitting right here right now.
See, you're not even capable of lying. You're listening to Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell. We've got former CEO of Tyco, Dennis Kozlowski, who spent 92 months in prison. We'll be right back. You're listening to Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell. Thanks to Dennis Kozlowski for agreeing to stay with us for a few minutes. And now we're really honored. His wife, Kimberly's been in the studio. So how did it evolve?
It was a wonderful bond.
And
Wonderful bond. I was able to, at that time, reach out and help somebody that was, I don't want to say in need, but he was in his situation. I was in my situation. For me, it was a good distraction from what I was going through. And I felt like I could bring something to the table for Dennis. And over time, we just sat and we talked. And you really get to know somebody when you sit at a table with them for 6-7 hours with no outside stimulation whatsoever. We weren't dating. We weren't going out to dinner.
That was going to be my next question. You talk about your character. He's in prison for 100 months. I don't know which month you started knowing him, but obviously you had to wait until he got out to have any kind of a dating kind of relationship.
Yeah, Kim was later in the process. I was probably around the 70th month or so. So
She only had to wait 3 years.
Yeah. So she only had to wait 3 years.
Was that tough? Or?
It was. Well, there was constant communication, and that's what our relationship was based on. So we were able to have letters, phone calls, see each other on the
emailing
weekends.
and stuff like that.
No emails. No emails.
Oh, see, I get to email with Madoff. It's a prison has to approve it, and then they can read every one.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into. They arbitrarily stopped it, and I just kept back until I got the warden to reverse it. So you couldn't even email.
No.
So you're writing letters?
Yes.
Long, beautiful, handwritten letters.
Yep.
Really?
Yes.
Which you kept?
I have every one.
So how long out of prison till you got married?
It was about 3 years out. See, we've been married 2 years.
Is there anything else that you would say about him that the public wouldn't know, or how do you think he's changed too?
I think that Dennis has finally found a real balance in his life. I think that working all of the time, he knows the importance of family, his daughters. He has 2 beautiful grandchildren. He's great with my children. And I think that he comes home every night and we leave all the business stuff at the door. And I think that when he comes home, he's very focused on me. I'm focused on him. And we just have built a wonderful communicative life together. We just always communicate.
How did freedom feel like?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was freedom first came with work release, and
which is somewhere in Manhattan. You stayed?
Yeah, it was up on 110th Street in Manhattan. And when I was transported from Mid-State to Ulster, and I was in something called protective custody. So it's like being in a box. I had very a whole lot of restrictions. I had to sit in the front row in the visiting room. I wasn't allowed outside. I wasn't allowed to use the mess hall or library or gymnasium. So it was its own form of punishment. So my time was harder than the average time.
Because of who you were, you mean?
Because of who I was, yes.
Were you in a cell by yourself?
I was in the cell by myself, but it used to be a punishment cell called the box. The thing that all the controversy is about right now, how long somebody should be in the box. And
so they couldn't break you?
No, I didn't break.
Let me ask you about a couple of the Tyco players. Mark Bellick, it comes across as what an ethical guy he was. So this must have been torture for him.
Oh, it was, yeah. And Mark had a brilliant law career, and he was brought on board, highly recommended by a lot of very influential people.
Iran-Contra, right?
That's right. He was a Iran-Contra lawyer. Yeah.
Now the head of HR was also the board liaison, right? So 2 reasons that she would have known everything that was going on.
She did. Yes.
Did she lie?
I don't think she. I don't think she lied. She was given. I think the legal term was queen for a day status. But her job was to.
So kind of immunity.
Yeah, she was the board liaison, for everything that went on, and she specifically had that role, so the board could go to somebody on any compensation event, on anything that went on, within the company.
Now, this is somebody, I assume that you put her in the job, that you were close to her in the sense that you trusted her?
Yeah, the board requested somebody to go to on all compensation issues without myself or the CFO or anybody else in between. And we said, who do you want? And they said, the head of HR, would serve extremely well. So she attended the compensation committee meetings. I did not attend those meetings. And she kept the board up to speed on all compensation within the company.
Did she believe you were guilty of anything?
I haven't spoken to her since I left the company. I just don't know.
I think it's more of a CYA, if anything, right? Yeah. I mean, rather that she would. The board of, it's called Fortune Society that you're involved with?
Yes.
I guess before you talk about that a little bit more, you're on 110th Street. What did you do there? You were working during the day?
You get up early in the morning. I would go to work. I was helping a company that was developing software to help train people to re-enter the workforce, mostly former offenders. So I'd leave there early in the morning, and then we turn back. And as time went on, you were allowed more time at home. So initially, I was allowed 1 night a week at home, and then it more so into 7 nights a week, at home.
What are you eating now that you really like, burgers or something that you've missed for those hours?
Sushi.
Sushi?
Yeah.
And you can talk about this too if you want. What was the impact on your kids and your family and all that?
My children held up extremely well in this. And my daughter, who was the attorney, understood what this was all about. My daughter, the businesswoman, was extremely supportive at all times. I first met my grandchildren, for the very first time when they came into the prison visiting room.
Jeez.
So it's the very first time that I got to see them, or hold them.
Was it tough for them to go from my dad is a nationally known top CEO to suddenly he's a criminal? They're telling me, or
I'm certain it was tough, but they never shared that with me. We've talked about it, but they've been extremely resilient, through this whole thing.
Do you have any cautionary advice for students or whatever, or what would you say?
I would say keep a low profile. Whatever you do in business and in medicine and any leadership position, keep a very, very low profile. Be successful, work hard, but the only whale that gets harpooned is the one that comes up to the surface.
So you believe good endings happen, right?
I do.
Do you believe that you can only appreciate the highest mountain if you've been in the lowest valley? Not that you'd recommend going.
Yeah. I believe you don't need to go to the highest mountain and stay away from the lowest valley, but function someplace in between those two places.
Okay, it's been a great honor having you here. Obviously, a legendary business record and a very honest, great human being who has survived almost a lynching, you might say. And Kimberly, great to meet you and to have you, and that you had the guts to kind of speak. I know you didn't really want to. I harassed you into it.
This has been Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell. Thanks to Dennis Kozlowski for joining us. Thanks to our listening audience. We'll see everybody next Monday night on Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell.